Together.
There was this other dimension to human experience, which is really hard to relate to today, that had nothing to do with money.
But by 1994, the United States Congress had lifted the injunction on web commerce. The web was suddenly open for business. People were now coming online in numbers. They still expected a free space, but commerce saw a new opportunity to make massive profits. While the early web was rooted in academia and the counterculture of California, the web's first great commercial venture had its roots in New York, with the dream of a whole new interactive relationship with customers.
I think the thing that we got right is a true obsessive focus on the customer experience.
Amazon has become the world's most popular online retailer. It has a customer base of 124 million people worldwide, buying products that range from its core business, books, to anything from TVs to food to clothes. In 1994, Jeff Bezos was an analyst for a New York hedge fund. He was struck by commercial opportunities suddenly being opened up by the web.
Web usage was growing at 2,300% a year, and I had never seen anything grow that quickly. And even though it was clear that the baseline usage of the web was very small, most people hadn't heard of the web in 1994, it was also pretty clear that anything growing that fast, though tiny today, is going to be ubiquitous tomorrow.
He had a very, I think, Napoleonic scale to what he wanted to do from the beginning. But meanwhile, the step one was making the bookstore. And that in and of itself was a very unusual undertaking.
Bezos realized that the fundamental problem with conventional bookstores is their size. This one, for example, can hold about 5,000 titles, so no matter how well run it is, the choice will always be limited.
What you could do online that you could never do in a physical store is build a bookstore with complete selection, universal selection. So that became the founding dream of Amazon.
Where Amazon blazed a trail, others would follow. The commercialization of the web was the beginning of a revolution in shopping and a fundamental shift in the web's values.
The rate of growth was astounding. If you needed any other reassurance that you were onto something huge, the company was just taking off like nothing else in the history of retail.
The global, instant and free space had become a global, instant and free market. All around the world, entrepreneurs seized upon a way of making a killing.
We were reinventing our entrepreneurialism, our kind of creativity, and maybe there was a sense that some of the older industries were changing. This was a time when youth and vibrancy and dynamism were going to be celebrated in this country in a kind of US-style way.
This was a very exciting time. I think sort of excitement was justified.
Between 1995 and 2000, over 20 million .com names were registered.
In a very few short years, we've got to the spectacle of billionaire teenagers with barely descended testicles spraying the stock exchange. Who can say what the e-world will be like in another 5 years?
There's optimism that always attends such a bright new technology and the future that it seems to beckon. Didn't last long. It didn't last long with me, not because I'm cynical, I think, but because history has given us enough examples.
The brave new web became synonymous with printing money.
Investor stocks have gone up an estimated $1.25 trillion.
Sales online have doubled since last year.
The 90s were insane.
You were having just buckets of money poured over your head.
In recent weeks, all the stock indexes have rallied to new records, led by the incredible surging internet stocks.
How hot is NASDAQ right now? Smoking. Red hot.
America Online, the auction site eBay, and the book dealer Amazon, all up more than 40% in December alone.
The internet has become the center of the technology universe. The internet is being viewed, rightly or wrongly, as the next industrial revolution.
So much money slushing around and people getting crazy valuations for their businesses.
Every experiment got tried. Every experiment got funded, including the things that didn't make any sense.
Across the board, people had invested millions in web companies with a great name, a great idea, but they hadn't figured out how to make any money yet. Apparently that could be fixed later. It was a recipe for financial carnage.
In early 2000, the NASDAQ lost a quarter of its value. Half of the dot-coms were simply obliterated in the bust that followed. Some $3.5 billion in paper wealth vanished in a year. In the froth of speculation, investors had lost sight of the risks they were taking with no certain prospect of a return.
I think that people got overexcited and believed that the web was creating a completely new way of doing business because it was. And in many ways, it was totally disrupting existing business models. I think that people then thought any old business might work, which was kind of the logic that perhaps was flawed.
People got confused and thought that, oh, if you had a lot of web traffic, that must be incredible. No, building a lot of branches, that's more of a unique asset that somebody else can't duplicate. Building a website, you know, was a kind of overnight thing. And so most of those companies weren't adding that much value. They just hoped that somebody who knew what they were doing would buy them, or somehow their scale would allow them to luck onto a business model.
And yet, the dot-com boom had drawn millions of new users onto the web and made it mainstream. And companies had learned the lesson that it simply wasn't enough to create online versions of traditional shops. They had to rethink what the web could do that would allow them to make a profit. Today, there is a company that has worked this out better than anyone else. Its origins are true to the ethos of the old free web, and yet it's become one of the biggest money-making machines in history. It's changed what it means for all of us to be online.
This company learned to make money from the web, but in doing so, it turned its consumers into commodities. How? By transforming our innocuous and apparently free search for information into an enormous money spinner. This company is Google, and it's turned our curiosity into its gold mine.
Today, Google has an extraordinary grip over the web.
Google today is better than Google yesterday because we just launched a bunch of things that made it better. And it'll be better tomorrow because we're going to launch a bunch of things tonight. It's constantly getting better.
Google makes sense of the web. Every day, over 2 billion searches are made via its search engines in 40 different languages.
Normally, you'd ask a smart person for advice on anything, but now you type into Google and you get tons and tons more information back than you ever got before.
But it's not just search. Its free video sharing site, YouTube, is taking on television.
We crossed the 1 billion view mark per day that we're serving.
We can use Google to fly over the planet or even look over our neighbor's fence. It's even challenging the biggest computer company of all, Microsoft, with a browser and operating system to rival Windows. And unlike Microsoft, what makes Google so unique and so special is that they have become one of the richest and most powerful companies in the world by giving away almost everything that they offer to us consumers for free. To understand what appears to be a paradox, we need to peer behind the screens into the world that Google has built. This is the beating heart of Google. At data centers like this, Google stores information about the web and what we search for. In the last quarter of 2009, Google made over $200 every second from the transactions that pass through data centers like this. Its net profits for the year was $6.5 billion. And that money comes from advertising, tailored around information that we give Google. Every time we use Google, we help them make money. I've come to meet the editor of Wired magazine, Silicon Valley's Bible. He's charted the rise and rise of Google.
One could definitely argue that Google is an advertising company. It's, lots of people do search. And one could argue that Google search is not significantly better or worse than Microsoft's or AOL's or anybody else's. But its hold over advertising is unmatched.
Why do you think the Google business model has worked?